Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. And we'll begin with a bow. So today I will be talking about Tonglen, Tonglen on the spot, or I like to say in the moment, Tonglen. So as we're beginning to move away from the loving kindness metta practice, we're not forgetting our loving kindness metta practice, but we're moving into another compassion practice called Tonglen, which means sending and taking, which is on the medium of the breath. And today I will be talking about on the spot Tonglen. Later on in the course, we'll talk about the more formal Tonglen, give instructions for how to do that. And you'll be reading the Compassionate Curiosity article by Gail Sanford, which is a really beautiful example of how to use this practice in clinical work. And I think we start with the Tonglen on the spot because many people and students that I've worked with feel like they've been already doing it in their life, but they didn't necessarily have a name for it. And so what it is based on exchanging ourselves for others or opening up our heart of compassion when we feel we're in a situation of struggle, confusion, pain, suffering. And Tonglen, basically the intention is based on sharing our happiness and accepting pain. So it goes a little bit further in terms of being willing to take on the pain and suffering of ourselves and others, to really feel that more deeply, as opposed to the metta practice. We feel that, we do that more with the perhaps difficult person, and then offering that to all humanity, all beings and creatures, opening up our heart of compassion. So this specifically, Tonglen, works with reversing that core human struggle of trying to hold on to everything desirable, to protect ourselves from any pain and suffering and discomfort and unwanted feelings. And we're all actually opening up to inviting that in, those unwanted feelings in. And as we read in Christopher Germer's book, what we resist persists. So if we're resisting pain and suffering, then we know that we create further pain and suffering. And so this is a practice to help us when we encounter difficulty and pain, that we're not resisting it. We're experiencing it fully for a moment and feeling it as we breathe in. And then as we breathe out, releasing that into enormous space and boundless awareness. So we could say also with this Tonglen practice and on the spot Tonglen is how we bring this into our daily life. And an example this morning, and often in the morning, I hear the cry of this little girl, and it's like a screeching, blood-curdling, screaming cry. And I don't know, she's quite young, maybe 3 or 4 years old. And her parents are probably bringing her to school, preschool, or she doesn't want to get in the car. And so she's screaming at the top of her lungs. And my first reaction was, tense. I could feel my body tensing and wanting to just have it go away. And then as I began to open up to her pain and suffering and actually take it in. So on the in-breath, we're taking in whatever situation, discomfort, in this case, this little girl's pain and suffering around not wanting to get in the car and go where her parents wanted to take her. And then on the out-breath, I could offer some spaciousness and some love and caring. And also, as it went on further, I opened up to her parents, how challenging it was for them to hear their little girl crying and being in such pain and discomfort. And so just kind of offering out any kind of spaciousness, well-being, calmness, peacefulness. And so that's basically the intention of the Tonglen practice, is to, on the in-breath, take in whatever we see as pain and suffering. It opens our heart of compassion. And then naturally, we want to offer something or provide some kind of comfort or regulation. And so when we're doing this, we're actually connecting to people that are in pain and suffering. It's our shared humanity. We all suffer. And by doing this, we're breaking down our own habitual barriers and patterns of wanting to protect ourselves and close off from any kind of discomfort. And it's a practice that we do for a lifetime. So please don't think that we're going to master this in a few weeks by the end of the semester. It's something that we begin to work with in our training as clinicians and counselors as a way to also work with our own pain and discomfort and be willing to acknowledge and feel it without pushing it away. So taking that in, acknowledging it, feeling it, and then offering for ourselves and others, our clients, simultaneously, some sense of warmth and compassion. So it's a wonderful practice, and I know for myself, I've been able to, I've used it a lot in clinical work, especially. And a lot of times I'll use it for myself, like between sessions. So when a client leaves and I'm feeling a lot of maybe stuckness or in myself or some kind of activation, I can begin to just work with that in myself and to be able to touch those difficult places and feeling that discomfort and tightness, that constriction, and then offer out for myself and also for the client some sense of openness and spaciousness. And hopefully we can do it in one breath cycle, but it might take longer as we're beginning to practice it. But on the spot, it's spontaneous. It just happens. We don't go through the formal steps, which you will learn later on. But here, we just connect. We feel a situation. It opens our heart. We connect, and then offer out on the out-breath some spaciousness, well-being, calmness, whatever is appropriate for the situation. So when we get overwhelmed with our own pain and fear and aversion, then we can shift our focus from the other person to ourselves or to the situation. And we can do that many times in the day. So I noticed I was at a meeting recently which felt very, very constricted when I went in, and I could feel that kind of tightness in myself as well. And so just basically, I started to do some Tonglen for both myself, feeling that constriction and tightness, and for the situation, for the people in the room. And as I began to do that, I noticed a sense of relaxation in myself, and also things started to shift in the meeting. It's not saying that because we do Tonglen, we're going to make things happen in that way, but it's more working with an attitude of willingness to feel the suffering and the pain, and then offer out. And you never know that when you offer something positive into the space, how that's going to shift things. But there's certainly not the expectation of that. But it's more the attitude of providing some kind of warmth and generosity and offering for ourselves and others. So another example in our lives could be driving a car. And I feel like that's a wonderful opportunity to practice Tonglen on the spot. You might be stuck in a traffic jam, and you could feel the sort of constriction and tightness and the discomfort in the atmosphere. Some people might even be beeping their horns or feeling the anxiety that they're going to be late for work or whatever. And so just being able to sit and feel those emotions and tension and pain for yourself and for the others around you, as you're opening up your heart of compassion and recognizing that, we're all in this together, that we're in a shared humanity, and that everyone suffers. And then being willing to, on the out-breath, expand that compassion and connection and feeling of openness and well-being to everyone in that situation. And it just happens. It's a natural process. And as we begin to do this practice, you might notice that maybe you have been doing that already, and that you're just beginning to have a name for it, and a practice and a tool. And the reason why we teach this, it is a difficult practice, but it also, I find for my own practice and my own sense, it's also a way to help me to feel resourced. That when I feel all tight and tense and constricted and stuck and everything's, feeling so claustrophobic, on the in-breath, on the out-breath, I can just release that into that open spaciousness and stay present. You can stay present with yourself and your clients in that situation. I sometimes feel like we could say Tonglen is an antidote to spiritual bypassing, because we're not avoiding pain and suffering. And as we know, spiritual bypassing is we're trying to avoid, we're trying to not feel, we're trying to get away from who we are and how things are. And so with this practice, we're learning how to hold and to actually embrace difficult experiences, difficult feelings with compassion. And so it really reverses that logic of always seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. It takes a lot of energy to keep that barrier in place. And so in our last practice, when we worked with cracking open the heart, can accommodate all. We're really discovering and having a way to go further with inviting and acknowledging and experiencing difficult feelings, sensations, emotions. Breathing in those raw sensations and emotional distress. And as we breathe out, releasing that enormity of suffering. We can't hold it. There's no way. When we hold it, we just get smashed. We have to release and let go and just offer that into boundless space. That space can accommodate everything. So, as we begin this practice, please, as always, take good care and just notice this week, perhaps, in your daily life, when a situation arises that feels very confusing or painful or discomforting. And just see if you can just hold that, breathe that in for a moment, feel it, and then in the out-breath, offer, extend some sense of well-being spaciousness, compassion, and also to include yourself in that practice. We're not being martyrs. It's not like we're taking in the suffering of the world and trying to transform it into something else. We're actually connecting to our shared humanity, and that we all suffer, but we can offer spaciousness and calmness and peacefulness as a way to hold all of it, or to experience it fully. We're not holding it per se. We're tasting it. We're acknowledging it. We're feeling it, and then releasing it into spaciousness on the spot in every moment. So you might notice when you come home from work or your practice, clinical practice, just check in how you're feeling when you enter your home space, and how you can just take a moment to check in, notice what you're feeling, and offer some spaciousness. We can shift our minds, our perception through this practice. And if we're feeling overwhelmed and tight and struggling, offer some compassion, spaciousness, whatever we need for ourselves in that moment. It's always the challenge to remember to do that. So I think that's all I'm going to say for now. And I look forward to reading your papers on loving kindness practice. And as we move into Tonglen on the spot, we'll do more of it the next few weeks and when I see you at the intensive. So take good care. Thank you all. We'll end with a bow.